Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our MEA webinar. We are so pleased you were able to join us this evening, and we want to say thank you for the gift of your time. We have a special treat for you tonight. Our presenter this evening is Dr. Peter Steenblick, who is the Director of Choral Activities at the University of West Florida and the Artistic Director of the Choral Society of Pensacola. You might recognize him because he was recently named the 2023 FMEA College Educator of the Year. And if you were fortunate enough to hear his choir at ACDA, it is easy to see why he is so well respected in the music community. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Peter Steenblick.
Thank you, Minnie, for this wonderful invitation. The title tonight is Culturally Sensitive Programming, but a couple other titles that might be appropriate are Diversifying Your Repertoire with Confidence, or How to Incorporate More Than Just Western Music. And from Minnie, she gave the description, how can teachers like us tackle multicultural pieces in a culturally responsive way that moves beyond just it sounds good or it's impressive. So we're going to be talking about repertoire choices, yes, and then we'll spend a little bit of time, because MPA season is on us, about social and emotional well-being during MPA season. The slides will be available or they are available right now at uwfsingers.com/FMEA. And that's a hidden website. So you're welcome to go there, or just screenshot this and then visit there later. Or anyone, of course, you're welcome to email me at any time. It is a daunting topic to talk about. All of us are nervous when we program music that may be outside of our comfort zone. And culturally sensitive programming. So allow me to be vulnerable a second and just talk about my own experience with programming different repertoire. I had taught high school for 10 years in Salt Lake City, Utah, and did my degrees at the University of Utah, both an undergrad and a master's. And then I got to this is just in one little respect. I was at the University of North Texas directing a women's ensemble of 120 women. And at the end of my first year, I started looking back on what I had taught them. And I did not realize to the extent that I was bringing my own personal bias into the room. That being said, I got to the end of the year and looked at all the repertoire that I was proud to have taught these women, and realized that I had not one female composer and not one female poet in the entire year of repertoire. And I had to stop and say, whoa, wait a second, I am not programming with purpose here. And so the next year I set some parameters and set some boundaries for myself and made myself grow as a conductor. So of course, we all know that first and foremost, we want to always program quality repertoire. There's no substitute for quality, but we must recognize our bias and strive to give all music a chance to be heard. Dale Trumbore gave this amazing quote. She's a composer out of California that changed my life. This was a year ago, or no, not a year ago, sorry, before COVID, a year before COVID. She said in the Composer Diversity Project, let's talk about quality. Quote, I program music solely based on quality. Quote, I don't think about race or gender when I program, only whether the music is good. And then she went on to say, I hear this so often, and this argument is fundamentally flawed. Here's why. You're programming based on the quality of the music you've already heard. If you don't regularly hear or actively seek out music by women or composers who aren't white, then their music will never make it onto your program. It never has a chance to be judged by its quality. If you don't know much or any music by composers who aren't white dudes, how can you possibly judge the quality of that music? You haven't heard it. If you're programming unconsciously, that music doesn't have a chance. Lack of quality isn't the issue here. unconscious programming is, but you can fix that so easily. You can consciously seek out more music by a diverse group of composers. If you consciously seek out music by a diverse group of composers, you'll think that some of it is high quality and you'll think some of it isn't, but it'll have a chance of making it onto your program. And then saying you program solely based on quality won't be a lie. Now, that's a pretty strong statement, but it resonated strongly with me. And it's now affected my own teaching philosophy. At the University of West Florida, I have the chance to teach choir and direct, but I also have the chance to pull back the curtain and let students actively see some of the methodology. The teaching philosophy paragraph that I've now written to reflect this, quote, "While on the one hand, I have the responsibility to select repertoire that covers the scope of Western music history, I must also actively seek out literature that represents a wide variety of composers, regions, religions, and cultures. Students must see themselves in the literature being performed. On the same token, students must be exposed to everything they are not." So that's a heavy ask of any of us. But I was talking about programming with an artist friend up in Tennessee, and he and I discussed about how, how does creativity come about? And he gave me the quote that with parameters comes creativity. So in discovering new repertoire, maybe you set the parameters for this year. Okay, I'm going to do only music that's in 3/4 time. Now, I don't recommend that, but I'm using this as a very basic example. But how far can you stretch the parameters within 3/4 time? Where can you go? Brahms did that, and that's how we got the lovely Liebeslieder waltzes, doing an entire set of 18 pieces. And then he did it again, saying, I'm just going to stick to this time signature and see what I can do. So as you're programming, maybe we set our parameters. Okay, we're going to explore this genre or this genre. And within that, how far can we go? And seeking out resources on whatever that parameters is. I do have to give this little plug. Just today, or this week, the Oxford Book of Choral Music by Black Composers by our Florida friend Marcus Garrett was released by Oxford University Press in anticipation of the ACDA conference coming up, and a tremendous and long overdue resource. That you can see there categories SAT accompanied and unaccompanied 35 pieces by Black composers, and this is a wonderful resource. So they just started shipping them just this past Thursday. So if you aren't on the mailing list for that, go ahead and get that. That would be a jewel for any library. But why is this so important? By comparison, many of us probably on this call were trained by a survey of choral music by Homer Ulrich, 1973. Not a single person of color in that book, yet that was the standard text when I was receiving my master's, and so don't be so hard on yourself if you have not been exposed to much or of diverse repertoire at this point. But it's easy to dismiss that and say, oh, well, that was a long time ago. But also Choral Repertoire by Dennis Schrock, 2009, is a book that was used in my doctorate classes. And again, Nathaniel Dett has about 2 paragraphs, but that's about as deep as he goes. He doesn't mention some of our prolific Black composers, like even Moses Hogan is not found in there. Yet many people are in that book. So it's a problem with our discipline in not providing these resources. So actively seeking resources on X, whatever that chooses to be. A few of the valuable resources that I turn to often: Eileen Gunther's book, In Their Own Words, Slave Life and the Power of Spirituals, 2016. It's a 400-pager, but devouring it one summer right after it came out. Many of you are familiar with the translations and annotations of choral repertoire. That's through the Jeffers Earth Song's website. There is volume 4 on Hebrew texts by Nash and Jacobson. Much of the Hebrew music out there for choirs was arranged by Jacobson, so they're tapping into the experts. That one was released in 2010, and it comes with a pronunciation guide. So what this is just a collection of the Hebrew texts most often set to music, and gives you all sorts of helps in those. Additional resources, one that I love, From Convent to Concert Hall by Glicklin and Schleifer, 2003, a guide to women composers. I think all of these are necessary to add to maybe some of the standard textbooks that we were issued in our training in college. And then finally, Teaching with Respect, Inclusive Pedagogy for Choral Directors by Stephen Seek, 2017. This is a tremendous resource that allows a conductor or choral director to analyze their bias and analyze where they're coming from, how they've been trained, and how to move forward into a more developed sense of programming. So take a look at any of those. And then if it's been a while since you've been in school, just a reminder about the ProQuest dissertation database. A lot of music, multicultural music is a strong resource topic. And so knowing about the ProQuest dissertation database, go to any college or university nearby and ask the librarian to access that, and they will likely help you find dissertations on any number of multicultural choral niches. So again, take a look at that Oxford book that came out just this week. If you're worried about tokenism, that is absolutely understood and absolutely a valid concern. We had an ACDA seminar not too long ago with Dr. Jason Dungy up at University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And he acknowledged that tokenism is an issue, but many efforts, you know what, they may start out as tokenism, but then keep moving forward. What Jason Dungy, Dr. Dungy expressed was that tokenism is not an event, but more of it's a trend. So to paraphrase him, it could be one piece by an underrepresented composer in your program, but once it becomes always one piece, that's when we start to have problems with tokenism. So diversifying the repertoire slowly, and say, 1 year maybe, okay, we add one piece by an underrepresented composer. The next year, add a second or another niche underrepresented composer, and start just slowly diversifying. And as long as it's not a standard, the one that I see very often on a December concert, you have the one Hanukkah piece, and then we move on. Maybe do 2, okay, or maybe do 7, or or let the balance shift periodically. So that's one valid and very important part of the conversation. Another conversation to have is a lot of conductors are scared to move forward because of appropriation or misappropriation. That is a fine line, but do your best. And as long as you continue to learn and put in the work of researching and knowing what you program, and do it consciously and actively seeking out, I don't know that we have a concern. Okay. I have a cousin who does a lot of work in Hollywood, and his job is, I had this discussion with him not too long ago. His job is to take a lot of the big Hollywood soundtracks, and if the movie is set in, let's use his expertise is in Asia. So if the movie is set in Asia, his job is to take the well-known composers' Hollywood soundtrack and extract certain instruments and bring in the Asian influence into the score before they do the recording sessions. And I asked him how he gets around this appropriation debate. And he said, well, I've studied and taken the time to get to know the instrumentalists all through China. And I know not just, oh, we need to pull out this violin and put in something that sounds Chinese. It's this Hollywood scene takes place in X region. These are the people who play instruments from that region and are the experts, and we need to contact so-and-so because she is the best at this genre and we're going to use her. So knowing why you're choosing, who you're choosing, and moving forward that way. So this is just again, pulling back the curtain, how we have moved things at the University of West Florida. In 2018, just before COVID, we did a concert called the Robert Shaw Tribute Concert. And that was one that I was very proud of because we researched with the Historiological Society the programs of when Robert Shaw brought his chorale through Pensacola, Florida in the 1940s, and we pulled out those programs and we replicated that concert. Now, that type of a chorale and that conductor in that time period, it was not a diverse repertoire by any stretch. So the following concert, we programmed I programmed a concert called All of Us, which was the subtitle of this concert was anyone but the dead white straight Western European influenced male composer. So in that sense, was this a tokenism concert? Well, it was a collection of pieces by underrepresented people. But what that did for me, and I didn't even realize that at the time, but that opened up a whole world of additional repertoire. So this goes back to the setting parameters. We set the parameters, no one but, it'll be these people, and we programmed a concert around them. And a lot of these pieces have now entered my canon of understanding. That led to the concert that we did virtually during the COVID, Stories of Struggle and Strength, which included a lot of underrepresented composers in there, and were able to grow as a choir, which led to, notice the All of Us concert we used the final movement from Considering Matthew Shepard as the title of the piece. So that actually prepared the choir to do the entire Considering Matthew Shepard just 1 year later, a year after this Stories of Struggle and Strength. So now we're 2 years beyond the concert that we had done, but it prepared the way for them to do that and to do an entire 2-hour oratorio on the Matthew Shepard murder in Wyoming. If you're not familiar with the story, of course, Matt Shepard, a college gay kid, was murdered after leaving a bar in just outside of Cheyenne and Laramie, Wyoming is where that takes place. So bringing that to the school, and because the students had been exposed to just the final movement 2 years prior, they were much more had a lot more understanding as we entered that project. Then finally, as many cited, we did our ACDA presentation just last October, titled it A Heart That Still Can Feel. And many of the pieces that we were discovering along the way made their appearance there. So I'm proud of where we've been able to grow as an organization. And so the second concert here, the All of Us, was what was in my mind a one-off, and let's check this off, but it has affected my programming choices from here on out. So again, that parameters, making your parameters and deciding what the concert is going to look like, how you're going to include, and then going from there. And then, in Dale Trumbore's words, and then saying you program solely based on quality won't be a lie. So how to prepare the X? Say you've chosen to do Hawaiian music or Chinese music or Laotian, any number of different cultures, or doing culturally sensitive works that are even just here in the States, like the Considering Matthew Shepard. How to prepare the X? do your research. My dear friend, Catherine Fazell, is on this call. Hi, Catherine. And I'm waiting for your session someday of how to score study when you don't have time to score study. The first step, I believe, now I'm not going to steal your session. You do that. We all want to hear from you. But the first thing would be learn the time and place of the composer. Who are they? Why did they write the piece? And don't forget your poets and your lyricists when you're doing music that is outside of your comfort zone. Okay. At the Florida Music Education Association, I was privileged to conduct the reading choir this past January, and what a wonderful experience that was. But one of the reasons that I detest reading sessions in general is just you go, boom, next piece, next piece, next piece, next piece. And we never stop and figure out who are these people and what does their music mean. And it was a very diverse packet that the students sang very well, but it required them to go between genres quite a bit. And so to help them with that, so they wouldn't think of it as just one piece, next, next, next. We just took some time, and I had created a timeline with all the composers represented. This is the last page of said timeline. So as you look down the list, we have Alicia Lee, Charlotte Botha, Mark Surratt, Brandon Boyd, Rena Ismail, Marcus Garrett, letting them, the students, see the face of the person that they are singing, and see the nationality and the dates. Who was the author of the text? Notice responsibility, Mark Surratt. That's the one that they actually sang cold read for the audience, is a text by Hillel the Elder, a Jewish early BCE century, okay? So getting the students to understand who these people are, and then additional info right here at the very far right, just again, the say her name, Alicia Lee. Lee composes a work honoring Kwanzaa tradition in the context of Black Lives Matter after the George Floyd protests. So we were able to help the students understand who they were singing. This one by Rena Ismail Tarakita has gotten a lot of playtime lately. It was in one of the FMEA choirs last year. Just having them see a picture of her and understand who she is. She's an Indian American composer, uses both tonalities in her compositions. Just helping them understand who and why. So looking at your own programming trends, this is, I consider this fantastic and life-changing research. Looking at your own programming trends and dare to make substitutions. Last week, I was at my desk and I wanted to give my concert choir a piece that they would connect to and something that fit right within what they needed. Again, so often we think about range, we think about intervals or skill set, and we don't often reflect on what the choir needs from an emotional standpoint, or from a who do they need to sing, not just what. So looking at your own programming trends, and I pulled out the very well-known, I won't name it because I don't want to get emails, but a very well-known piece that has made the rounds in high schools and college campuses. And I was ready to give that to them. And then I realized, oh, wait, okay, women's choir. This is a male poet, a male composer. Is there another, and not that they can't always do that, or they can't do that sometimes, but everything else in their folder was male composer and male poets at this point in the semester. And so stopping myself and saying, what else would work in this spot? And where we landed was a much better choice for those women, and they have really taken to the piece. And so I'm excited to have introduced to them a new piece that I had not taught before, but it wasn't the first card in my file. It was back a ways, but now it's moving up in the queue. So looking at your own programming trends, and in programs, often, I'm looking at this, doing Mozart or doing Nathaniel Dett. Now, even as I created that bullet, I had to correct myself. I chose to use only the last name from the composer, Mozart, versus the full name of the lesser known Nathaniel Dett. So to even the playing field, making a listing, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart versus Nathaniel Dett. So there are times to engage those underrepresented composers and bring them in. And educate yourself, your students, and your audience. At FMEA this past month, we were privileged to have Tesfa Wanamontagu teaching the reading or the concert choir. And the number of educators that were not willing to say his name out, his last name, because they didn't know how to say it was staggering to me. And it just takes a little bit of research. I may get in trouble for saying that, but it takes a little bit of research, going on a Google search to St. Olaf College, where he teaches. He has an audio link on his website of how to say his own name. So, taking the time to educate yourself and your students and your audience. We were just so privileged to learn from Tesfa Wandamagniu and his wonderful repertoire choices and music. And then UNC Charlotte, again, Jason Dungy, has in his, he did a Black composers concert, and he didn't even need to take the time to educate the audience, but he simply, see here on the screen, put Persephone Powell's picture up above the choir as they were singing. So even just taking that little bit of time to educate the audience of who we are singing and why we are singing them really helps with that factor. A few examples from our recent experience. Getting students to speak about why this music is important to them really helps soften the discomfort. Roland Carter's Lift Every Voice and Sing is a wonderful anthem that should be known by all the choirs across the world. But I was, again, surprised how many of my own students didn't know the tune, the original tune. And so having just one student talk to them, their peers, about her experience with this tune and why it was so important to her. And it just quickly and immediately brought everyone on board. And we were able to sing, Lift Every Voice and Sing. And if the students weren't able to connect to it right away, I teach in an area of the state that's a mostly white choir. And so helping them understand the importance of the Black national anthem, and that this student spoke about how she, in her elementary school, sang it every morning right after doing the Pledge of Allegiance, and why it was so important to her. So allowing students to be part of the conversation is important. Fengyangge is a Chinese folk song by Chen Yi. In case you're not familiar with it, let's listen to just a little. Let me pull it up. I'm going to screen share in a different way. And we're going to go over here. Okay, so here's the Fengyangge. We'll let it get started. delightful little piece. So I'm so grateful that my students were able to latch onto that quickly and learn it. But part of the reason that they were able to go there so quickly, one student said with quite a bit of emotion in her voice after our first rehearsal, she is from her origins, her family history is from Western Europe and Asia. And she said, I have felt guilty my whole choral singing life that I have only been singing repertoire that relates to my father's family. And here I am in college, and I've done choir since elementary school. And this is the first time, and she started to get emotional. She said, this is the first time that I have sung music that connects me with my mother. Man, she needed that, and we all needed to help her with that. And we were able to prepare that piece, and the students were all on board. So getting students engaged quickly is helpful. Now, also with that one, this is just an example, the Fengyange, contact directors through YouTube that you have seen. We're all out there. And particularly just when you find a piece that you want to do, and it may be out of your comfort zone, contact them. My own resources, I just sent them off to a school teacher out in on the West Coast who was asking for resources on this piece, Fengyange. I was very privileged to be able to travel to China and speak with some composers and musicians from the region where this song was written. And I was able to capture audio recordings of them saying the Chinese slowly, and then reading it quickly as one would a poem, and then having them, even this director, even sing the melody for us so the students could hear how that sounds. And those are just things in my own collection on that piece that I'm happy to share with people as they're preparing these pieces. So finding 2 or 3 directors on YouTube that have done the pieces that you're trying to, the X that you're trying to program, and reaching out and finding what are their resources, what might they be willing to share. And then, of course, reach out directly to the living composer or the poet or the lyricist. When we were working on considering Matthew Shepard, we were able to have a Zoom interview with Craig Hella Johnson, a whole workshop with him. Leslie Newman was the poet who wrote many of the poems that then Craig Hella Johnson set to music in that glorious work. And she met with us for an entire day over Zoom as well, and Michael Dennis Brown as well. But again, Leslie Newman, this is also very common. She is another one who has an audio link to how to say her name on her website so that we can perform her music with confidence. And she understands that with the accent aigu over the second E in her name, that it confuses people. So she's made that resource available. So understand, even just that, understanding how she wants her name said and respecting her by doing that little bit of research was very helpful. And then the audience factor, the on-ramp or the off-ramp, as I'd like to call it. At our ACDA performance, we did the Say Her Name by Alicia Lee that is making the rounds right now. It's an incredible piece. I'll let you listen to how we did the on-ramp and the off-ramp, but thank you, Minnie, for your compliments with the ACDA performance. We tried desperately to make sure that this Say Her Name, which is a piece that Alicia Lee wrote almost immediately after the George Floyd protests in the summer of 2020, and taking the Say Her Name movement. When she performs it with SSAA choir, the score reflects it reflects entirely female victims' names. When she performs it in the SATB format, she includes male names as well. And so that Say Her Name takes on a different meaning. And she says right there in the beginning of her score that she invites the choirs to incorporate names that are situationally relevant to them. So when we performed this piece, we did the on-ramp and off-ramp, and I'll get to that in just a second. But also the students had a week-long discussion during class, and we spread it out. over who to include in the Kwanzaa ceremony of that piece, as they recited names of some of the victims of police brutality. And they decided, okay, we want it not necessarily a geographical region, because there are so many directions you can go with that, but they wanted each name that we said to have personal meaning to someone in the choir. So the choir students, and we had some involvement of a philosophy professor on campus, and we had some other resources available as we did these discussions, but the students brought names forward. And that made the piece relevant and personal to everyone in the choir, or at least it was relevant and personal to someone they know. So here's the audience factor, keeping the audience factor in mind. The Say Her Name was not just a standalone. We actually started preparing the audience for this very painful piece from the very beginning by selecting a piece called Joy that opened our concert. That allowed the audience to understand, even if they looked ahead in the concert program, that allowed them to see that they were going to be taken care of. And then we went through and we did our Madre la de los Primores and the Gloria by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Then we started really setting the stage for Say Her Name by giving Prayer for Compassion by Gwyneth Walker. And think of key relationships as well, how you're going to prep them. So we ended in C minor in the Gwyneth Walker. And then we went into the Say Her Name by Alicia Lee in A flat minor, mediant relationship. And then we immediately came out of that by a dominant relationship into the Somewhere by Sondheim and Bernstein. So this allowed the audience to travel, much like the imagery I have is the Vietnam War Memorial, where the audience came down with us and then we took them back out, and ended the concert with Dan Forrest's Cantate Canticum Novum. So I'm going to switch screens here and just show you those two elements, how we were able to do that. Here is the on-ramp as we finished the Prayer for Compassion by Gwyneth Walker. So that was the on-ramp, and you felt the audience just come with us. And then we allowed them to have the off-ramp. Here's the off-ramp taking us into Somewhere. So I believe strongly that even an MPA set of 3 pieces can be a very strong tool for programming and exploring in programming. So think of when doing culturally sensitive music, make sure that we are preparing the audience and the students mentally to go from one piece to the next and to the next, and how is that going to flow? That way it's not just unconscious programming. A few other landmark pieces, just because we have this platform to look at. When I say substitute this for that, to bring in some underrepresented composers. Maddalena Casolana, her Morir non può. If you're thinking of doing a Palestrina, why not look at her? She is the first female composer to have a whole book of her music printed and published, and this Morir non può can stand up against any Palestrina, and it's just an exquisite piece. The anonymous composer that did Hanak Pachap is a Quechuan piece from the indigenous peoples of Peru. It is believed to be the first polyphonic music published in the New World. So if you're thinking of doing William Byrd's If Ye Love Me, why not insert the Hanak Pachap instead? It's a piece that we all should know and recognize, being from our New World, from our continent. It's quite a landmark piece that we should be, it's not in those textbooks that I shared earlier. And then finally, the one that we did include in our ACDA performance, Madre la de los Primores by Sister Juana Inés de la Cruz from Mexico. She's a poet, composer, philosopher, nun, considered to be the Hildegard Bingen of Mexico. Just an exquisite piece, and it is SSAB. Who doesn't have, my choir needs stuff like that. So finding pieces that can really work into your already existing programming brilliance. Again, these slides are available at uwsingers.com/FMEA, or email me at any time. Now we're going to change gears for just the last few minutes and talk about social emotional well-being amidst concert season. I talk a lot with young educators about burnout. The most at risk for burnout are music educators, who are often the most productive, dedicated, and committed to their friends or their fields, are frequently most affected by burnout. And we especially feel that in MPA season. The most at risk are the enthusiastic and passionate teachers, those between the ages of 30 and 45, those who've been teaching 7 to 15 years, and single or divorced teachers. Okay, so check yourself, and just making sure that we understand, all of us on this Zoom call, we understand that burnout is not an event. It is a process. It is a spectrum. It's not something that happens. It's something that's ongoing, and we're on a burnout spectrum at all times. There are some wonderful ways to break down that burnout and manage. We're going to talk about 3 of them: self-care, maintaining a perspective that's healthy, and minimizing sources of frustration after we identify those. So these are the 3 areas. If you want more, I've got more resources on managing your own mental and emotional health while teaching, but we're just going to explore a few of the ways. The first, going back to these 3 areas, I try to pick one thing out of each area each week, one thing of self-care, one thing of modifying my perspective, and one thing of minimizing a source of frustration, and just taking a look at those 3 areas. The first, self-care. Sleep is non-negotiable. Meals are non-negotiable, even in MPA season. Exercise is non-negotiable. Get out and walk around the building. I'm a big fan of midday walks. After a rehearsal, maybe walk around the building once, do 1 lap around the school, and get back to your office, or eat lunch just outside your emergency door. I use the term sacred spaces. For me, even though I'm a choir professor and I've dedicated my life to it, choir music does not belong in my car. It never does. In my car is simply cheesy British pop music that's 1-4-5, maybe a 6 chord and 1, very predictable, and I protect that space so that I do have a space to unwind that is not choir related. Stick to the workday as much as possible. On performance day, this is a choice that I make. I go to performance days usually quite underdressed, and I'll wear jeans on the performance day. That way, and I leave my tux at home. I know that's dangerous, but I'll do that so that I have to go home for dinner. When a student comes up and says, oh, I need to run a little thing and I need to rehearse. Nope, I can't, I need to go home. And it's just, it makes me get out of the building and get home for dinner. If that's not possible, I'll throw the tux in the car and have it there, but head out to dinner at a restaurant with a good book to be able to just have the same type of disconnect. Remember, casual dress is not just for Friday. Always program, this goes back to the stuff before, music you like, not necessarily music in your comfort zone, but music you like is a healthy part of self-care. The second area is modifying your perspective to where it's healthy. I use the term bad day barometer. I was talking with a woman whose job was to paint Christmas ornaments, and she collects Christmas ornaments all year long, the clear ones, and paints them and has them on every surface throughout her home. And she, when we were talking about her job, she said to me, well, I love that my job, a bad day is when a Christmas ornament falls off a table and breaks. And she says, and then I have to take a step back and say, wait a second, that is pretty great. That for me, a bad day is when I break a Christmas ornament. Comparatively speaking to other careers, for us, a bad day, now there are legitimate bad days in choir teaching. There are legitimate bad days, but is it when Matt chooses to breathe and measure 32 when he shouldn't have? I'm not so sure that that's a true bad day. And that's kind of wonderful about our profession. Stop the screaming. Here's a little video that might remind you of me during MPA season or yourselves.
The last to go. We'll see the first three go before her. And her mangy little dog, too. How about a little fire, Scarecrow? No! You cursed brat! Look what you've done! I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world! Who would have thought a good little girl like you could destroy my beautiful wickedness? Ah, look out! Look out! I'm going!
Now we're going to pause it right there because this is my favorite moment of the film. Look, the effect that the Wicked Witch's screaming had does not have the same effect she thinks it has. And this is true for our students as well. Look at, so the Cowardly Lion over there, he's like, I don't know what just happened there. Notice that the Scarecrow is looking at everyone else going, what the heck was that? And the Tin Man is going, that was pretty amazing. And then Dorothy wants to have the witch committed to some sort of asylum. So when we lose control, and all of us have had those moments, I believe, but when we do that, it doesn't have the effect that we think it has. They just sit there and they go, what is going on? I love those faces. Now, as we keep going, when that happens, when and if that happens, hopefully it's less and less as we move forward, dare to apologize. I grew up in a situation that one of my mentors said to me early on in my career. I had told her that I had lost control with the choir, and I was very self-aware that I had said some things that I should not have said. And I said, what do I do? She says, you just go in the next day and you just keep teaching as if nothing happened. And it was the attitude of you never apologize to the students. And I heartily disagree. It is absolutely appropriate and necessary to apologize and move forward. Take some time to observe your peers. This is again in the perspective. When we go to MPA, that's a chance to just sit and observe your peers. That's a pretty great work day. If you can send the students with a parent early or late, or so that you can stay early or you can go home later. use the chance to just applaud what the teacher down the street is doing. Malcolm Gladwell was asked what his favorite news article was that he had worked on, or news story. And he said, and I believe this to be very applicable to music educators as well. He said, in order to be a good journalist, my favorite story has to be the one that I'm working on right now. And that's true of our MPA music or anything in our concert repertoire. In order to be an effective educator, our favorite song, when students ask us what our favorite song is, really has to be the one that we're doing right now. Again, this is just adjusting your perspective so that we're in a healthier space. Keeping attainable to-do lists. This is longer than I thought it was going to be. I've edited these down. Okay, and then the last section is minimizing frustrations. Take care of your office personnel, your custodians, your copy center personnel, and whoever the heck is the one that orders your buses for you. Just make sure you're taking care of them. Little gift card, a little $5 Chick-fil-A gift card goes a long way with these people and keeps your MPA season healthy. Keep a clean desk. I try to make sure that my desk is clean every Friday. Not every day, I can't do that, but every Friday. The big five. This is one of my favorite points. I grabbed this from Jessica Napolis. Many of you on this call probably know Jessica. On a performance day, I simply show five. When a student has a question, I simply show 5 fingers to them. And they know that that means that they need to evaluate before they ask me, is it important? Is it important right now? Can I solve this myself? Can anyone else in the world solve this for me? And if it's a concern, even if I brought it to Dr. Steenblick's attention, is there anything he could do about it? So they go through these 5, and you're amazed. It's amazing how they can get to some of these others and not ask you a question. So if they can solve it themselves, I've been the proudest dad at some of those moments. Realize how your rehearsal order also affects your mood. Make sure that we're beginning and ending rehearsal on something that's attainable and something that makes them feel good about themselves and makes us all feel good about ourselves. And then lastly, don't be tied to the outcome. It is what it is. I think one of the most powerful things in my career that helps shape me in a healthy fashion is actually getting very low scores at one of our MPA events at a regional level. And we did not get the state invitation. And you know what? It was one of the best things for me, because it helped me to not be tied to the outcome. It helped me to grow beyond that and just be appreciative of what the students did accomplish. We were proud of what we did, and it's okay that it didn't read to the judges. So here's just some thoughts. The slides are available at uwfsingers.com/FMEA. You're welcome to grab those, and I'll leave it there for just a second. Minnie, Orr, thank you so much for this wonderful chance to share some of these thoughts with our people, and I'm just very grateful for you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Steenblick, for being with us tonight and taking time out of your busy schedule to just share your wealth of knowledge with us. And I'm sure if any of you, thank you guys, throw your love, throw your rose into the chat. Throw a rose. That's awesome. Yeah, great presentation, Peter. Thank you so much. From Jason Locker. Thank you from Angela. Yeah, we just can't thank you enough for just taking the time to spend an hour with us tonight.
Of course.
So guys, make sure you, make sure you go to FMEA and get those resources. I certainly have lots of notes that I will be applying the next time I have an opportunity to select a program. So really appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, and good night.